Hello Horror Hounds, I've got a couple of Wishmaker questions that I'm going to ask you and then answer myself because I can't hear you and I want to give the impression of this being conversational. So the first question is, what are the best parts of the Wishmaker mythos as created by Peter Atkins, who wrote the first film? Well, Andrew, I'm glad you asked. For me personally, the best bits are the ways the wishes are interpreted so as to grant them, but so that the consequence comes back on the wisher. And secondly, the way that the waker, the person that releases the jinn, has three wishes within which they either unleash hell or they manage to find some sort of loophole and beat the devil, tricking the devil. Interesting answer, Andrew. Second question. What are the hardest bits to write when you're coming to write a Wishmaster movie? I'd say exactly those things that make the first one such an intriguing proposition, which is precisely why by the time we get to Wishmaster 3, Devil's Stone, or as I believe it's known in the US, Beyond the Gates of Hell, such a glorious title for such a film that's very small in scope. By the time we get to number 3, that's why I think that most of what makes the jinn a unique horror movie villain is completely jettisoned in favour of a bolted on Judeo-Christian story of good versus evil. I will admit, at first, when the story began to circle a professor of antiquities and his students, and they began covering ancient Greek myths and were looking at ancient Persian artifacts, I hoped that the writers would plumb these ancient myths for stories ripe to repurpose for the jinn. However, once again, an entity from Persian myth comes crunching up against Christianity in the form of the summoned spirit of the Archangel Michael, and it limps through a couple of poorly choreographed sub-WWE fights towards a conclusion that states only the waker can kill the jinn. We're killing the jinn now. We're not trying to outwit the jinn. We're not trying to use our wishes or find a loophole to get out of unleashing hell. We're flat out talking about killing this immortal creature now. Only Michael, Archangel Michael's sword of justice can kill the jinn because, lo, even though the spirit of Michael is summoned and enters some fucking college dude, it appears with some wibbly-wobbly sword as well. Only the waker can kill the jinn. Only Archangel Michael's sword of destiny can kill the jinn. But the waker can only wield the sword of justice when he or she becomes worthy. So it's really a waiting game, and you're there and you're tapping your foot. I might even forgive that if the wishes made and granted still had the delicious black humour to them. If they were shot through with irony, but they're so painfully literal. A college administrator wishes that her filing system would catch fire so she could go home, and lo, there is a fire and she's burnt. A student wishes to lose a little bit of weight, and boom, she starts puking up her excess fat and blood and eventually her stomach. And it's actually quite a cool little effects sequence, but there's no wordplay involved with the wish or the granting of the wish. The waker boneheadedly asks the jinn to end that particular person's pain. So, boom, she's dead. And the jinns are like, what are you looking at me like that for? I ended her pain, didn't I? Some of the wishes don't even make sense. The professor at the start wishing that the two women he considered the most attractive in the world were here, now, and they're in love with me. How does that devolve into them appearing topless, getting off with him for a little bit, and then killing him? One of the girls in this wishing that she was somewhere where nobody would be able to find her because the jinn's after her, but the jinn overhears her and goes, oh, well, no one will find you here, and then has her stick her head in a cage full of rats. I mean, that one doesn't even make sense. And then there's the djinn himself. Clearly a different djinn from the first two movies. And this film takes a lot of flack for the djinn not being played by Andrew Divoff. And let's be honest, with the first two movies, and especially the second, Divoff leverages weak scripts and weak scenes into at least entertaining scenes when he's on the screen. This time the djinn in supernatural form is played by John Novak, and I know an awful lot of people take exception to his voice, because it's not the deliciously fruity yet gravelly voice that Divoff portrayed. He sounds a little like a camp Pinhead to me. He's much more down to business. I'm more annoyed by the fact that there's no baby form of the djinn once the djinn's summoned. In the first one there was that excellent sort of like slithering across the floor, semi-developed baby come tadpole looking djinn. In the second one the djinn is a sort of pulsing mass of pukey flesh in a wall that his head pokes out of, and eventually he slides and slips out of. In this one, the djinn's awakened, and boom, in a cloud of dry ice, he's there, fully formed, and just getting down to it. And he's too literal with his wishes, and there's no showmanship. There's no air of temptation. This djinn has a lot more agency. He does more stuff. What's cool about the character of the djinn in the first two movies, and the djinn himself expresses, I have all of this power, practically unlimited power, and I can't use it until one of you worms makes a wish. But this djinn's no longer opportunistic. He makes stuff happen. He attacks people. He does things under his own agency. Whereas with previous installments, some gore effects, and especially MVP Andrew Divoff, are used to distract you from weaknesses in the script or bits that drag. Here, it's nudity. And whilst I'm no prude, it's very clear that there's a sort of cry of bring on the breasts to try and distract from the fact that really not much is going on here. It's the set in a college campus. It's the emptiest campus in college history. And yet, given that both the previous movies at least tried to end on a big death crowd scene, you're on a fucking college campus. End your film at a student party and unleash the carnage there. It's crying out for that to happen. Yeah, sure, all right. If you're keeping score, there are 3 pairs of breasts for you to see, and there are a couple of maybe good gore effects, but boy, this is a drag. Regular viewers by now will know that rather than styling myself as a one-man opinion factory, I like to end these videos with some alternate viewpoints taken from the Internet Movie Database user reviews. Our first reaction to Wishmaster 3 comes from Benny41. The first 2 were some of the best horror I have seen, but this one, ugh! I wish I had a wish, because then I would rewind time and stop myself from renting it. The djinn in this one doesn't even sound evil. Costumes are not worth mentioning, and the setting, OMG. How much worse can one film get? It has ruined the whole bloody series. The djinn in the first and second one sounded so satanic I was glued to my seat, but this new guy is pure shit. Also, the special effects and gore can be easily equalled by any children's cartoon or movie. I mean, come on, it was 2001 and that's all they could come up with. I've seen more realistic effects created by my 6-year-old cousin in his back garden with a sparkler, and he didn't have a budget from a film company. If the fourth one is like this, someone please kill me. And Sheffy68 says that if you like looking at AJ Cook, then this is an okay movie. Not horrible to watch. Several close-ups of AJ's eyes, even a nipply shot at the start. All in all, not a bad way to spend a few minutes looking at her. Oh yeah, there's some bad guy monster thingy too. She sets it free by accident, and he becomes obsessed with her. Well, really, who wouldn't be immediately smitten by Miss AJ? The plot was thinnish. Acting was, just okay. But we get to see AJ a whole lot, smiley face. The rest of what was in here was fluff, The SFX were just okay, not gross or believable. There was some nudity, but not from our heroine. I'd watch it again, in a dark room, just to see AJ doing her thing. Looking awesome. Smiley face. Next up, just like Rocky was followed by Rocky 2, 3 and 4, Wishmaster 3 takes us to Wishmaster 4, the prophecy fulfilled.